guys, what's up and welcome to another episode of the Goodcast Show. So my guest today, he's a distinguished member of the Academic Advisory Council at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, ERIA. As a visiting fellow at the Crawford School, he's also a visiting fellow at the Crawford School of Public Policy, Australia National University. He brings a wealth of expertise to his research role. His international engagements include a visiting scholar at the International Monetary Fund and fellowships at the ASEAN Studies Center, Universitas Gadjah Mada, and the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute, Singapore. He is renowned for his insightful op-eds in publications as Nikkei ASEAN in publications such as Nikkei ASEAN Review and Jakarta Post. He is also an accomplished author with 4 books on the Malaysian economy, one of which we'll be reviewing today, which is Regaining Control, Malaysia Economic Policy During COVID and Beyond. Please welcome my guest, Mr. Shankaran Nambiar. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Vinod, for having me on your show.
Yeah, thank you so much for finally making it. I'm sorry for changing the dates earlier on, but thank you so much. So I want to get to this book where you address the 2022 budget. You call it the budget with the heart, as I guess it would have been, considering it was a budget right after COVID-19. Recently, of course, we have the record-breaking 425 billion ringgit budget that was announced by Prime Minister Anwar. What is your opinion on the budget?
I think Prime Ministers have a way of announcing budgets with a big heart. And perhaps this time Prime Minister Anwar announced a budget with a bigger heart. Because if you notice, he tried in that budget to address all possible groups, all sections of society, right from the top to the bottom, even extending it to foreign workers. That might be the good or the not so good part, but true to him, he did try to make an attempt to spread the budget, the benefits of the budget to all sections of society.
Many people are calling this budget basically a sort of like a Robin Hood style budget where you tax the rich and help the poor. Do you agree with that assessment of the budget?
At first glance, it perhaps does seem so. That there are some aspects of the budget which do seem to do what you claim is being done. But I'm not sure how much you'd be able to collect by through those tax budget, those tax measures. There is, for instance, he wants to extend the SST to see it having wider coverage. He's promised to go more extensively into it than in the previous budget. And that is not particularly a Robin Hood style budget.
Now, one of the things that you talk about in this book, which is that you say that the move from GST back to SST was actually something that led to a loss in revenue for the government. I think you basically quantified it to about 22 billion or around there, loss in tax revenue. Now, and then you also went on to say in the book that perhaps this would lead the government to create more taxes in order to basically mitigate the losses that were faced earlier on. In this current budget, of course, we have the new dividend tax, the 2% annual dividend tax on earnings from dividends. We also have the sugar tax. We have an increase in the sales tax and all that. Do you think that this budget is doing exactly what you perhaps foresaw way back then?
I don't think it was a huge prediction on my part. It's very simple
economics,
arithmetic. If you are foregoing tax revenue through measure X, then you have to bring into play measure Y, Z in order to try to recover that amount. Given that you have a very huge deficit and the rest of it. So there is some way, and you also have a big operation expenditure. So there is some way in which you have to earn enough money in order to cover all of this. You could. There's another way out, which is you could still go into debt mode. Try to raise money through other ways. I mean, for instance, you could go for huge infrastructure projects, etc., borrow more, and might not be such a bad idea because you don't have to pay for whatever you borrow right away. Spread it over a period of time. And if these projects do have a good return, then that's fine. I mean, you still get going, and over I don't know how many years you would be able to get back on your feet. But here the Prime Minister wanted to cut the deficit, and he wants to bring it to something like 3%, which is a sensible thing to do. And if you want to do that, which means you are committing to not getting into more debt. And again, I don't think that all debt is bad. It is bad if it's wasteful. The money that's spent on one MDB obviously was wasteful, big burden. So then you would have to find other ways of earning the kind of funds that you need. I'm not terribly worried about the sugar tax. I mean, it's a good thing. It's good for your health also.
Well, I don't think that's the reason why. But are we saying that, I mean, are we seeing, because one of the big critiques about this budget was all these taxes will definitely fall back, will most likely fall back to the consumer. So I remember during, post Najib, right before the whole drop of the BN regime before, under Najib, you had, people like Rafiz Ramli saying that eventually the people will have to pay for all this lavish expenditure and this wastage of money. So is this budget sort of a result of that we are now having to pay for the extravagance that was enjoyed by Najib, his wife, and also the BN people that came before him?
I don't know. I haven't met Najib. He might not be such a bad person after all.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ever get a chance, you should have him on your show.
I definitely want to. Yeah, he's a great speaker.
Sure. I'm quite sure he'll be good fun to talk to.
Yes. But basically,
I think the idea of the GST definitely was a good idea. I mean, it's a kind of tax that you have in, 150 countries or something. It's supposed to be a very efficient tax. It has very deep coverage. And as your GDP goes up, you can expect your tax revenue to go up. So there are lots of positives with the GST. And at the point when he introduced the GST, there was also a crunch problem, and you needed to raise revenue, so he introduced the GST. The GST failed. It was used as also a big campaign point to bring down BN, but or rather. It failed for a number of reasons, and I think perhaps the biggest reason why it failed was because of poor implementation. Talk to shopkeepers, restaurant owners, just about anyone who
delays in refunds and all that.
Yes,
for
exactly.
I think more than 2 years and all that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's simply not acceptable. How do you expect a business to go on if you are not getting a timely refund, not getting it in 3 months or whatever? And as you say, if you have to wait for 2 years, then that puts terrible stress on your business, on your cash flow. Now, what could have been done would have been to address these implementation issues. That wasn't addressed. I don't know why it wasn't addressed. And perhaps, I mean, the way I look at it, that there probably would have been some merit in trying to reintroduce the GST, perhaps tweaking it, fixing the gaps that went wrong the earlier time. But the Prime Minister says that he's not going to look at GST, or it's not the best thing to look at until your minimum wage goes up. And he's quoted some number like 3,000 ringgit, which means that for a very long time, we're not going to see the GST being reintroduced. Once again, I don't have all the figures or the modeling projections with me.
But interesting that you said about you talk about minimum wage, because in this budget also it was announced that the wage would increase from 1,005 to 1,007. Is this something that we should be doing? And I understand, of course, the people element of it, increasing minimum wage. I understand that part. I understand inflation and the need to increase it. But you also talk about this book about revisiting Malaysia's status as an attractive hub for FDIs. Wouldn't this rise in minimum wage make us less attractive for basic companies from the US and Europe?
I think raising the minimum wage, I don't know if the government has done a good job of selling this idea. And I think that has been a problem, not just with this government, but also previous administrations. They've been rather poor in reaching out to the public, in selling the idea, getting buy-in before it's introduced. And I think this is one more instance of poor communication of economic policies. I think there are a number of reasons behind this. As you say, there's, of course, the moral part about it, that people should enjoy a reasonable wage, have a decent livelihood, etc. That's obviously from a moral point of view, from a needs-based point of view, that's important, that's necessary. But beyond that, I think the government also would like to see a movement away from labor-intensive production to more automated, more capital-intensive production. And it probably thinks that by raising the minimum wage, you would in effect be pushing factories, manufacturing, the manufacturing sector, maybe even the agricultural sector, to move to other modes of production, right? And but whether this raising the minimum wage and perhaps doing it abruptly and I don't know if with adequate discussion with the sectors involved is the best way in which it could have been done. It's probably necessary. My question is when, how? And I think there's also another factor that goes behind it, and that's if you raise the minimum wage, you cut down the use of unskilled foreign labor. But then again, if you look at the practice of it, I don't know how well it would work. For instance, the plantation sector, if you abruptly tell them that this must be done, and they are very labor intensive, I don't know how well it will work with them and whether they'll be able to go ahead with meeting the production needs, their output targets with the higher cost.
Do you think that perhaps this decision to increase the minimum wage has been sort of done because Malaysia now is suffering from a labor shortage across many industries? You look at healthcare, for example, we are losing our nurses to Dubai, Philippines, and all these other places that pay more. And of course, they have to deal with the fact that Indian nurses are more sought after because of just the volume of experience that they have. You look at plantations, they suffer from labor shortages. So could this be to make us more attractive for foreign workers.
But it also raises the cost.
Definitely.
Right.
So then shouldn't the answer be then, instead of focusing on increasing wages, shouldn't the government look at investing more in automation? That would be a way forward.
Okay, I think that there's a problem there.
Okay.
Because I think the firms probably, I mean, they want to, of course, automate, but they might be worried about the cost of automation. They might not have the resources to get into it quickly.
Yeah.
And they would probably seek support from the government in order to automate. The government, for its part, might be reluctant to bear the costs of supporting automation. And probably at this particular point, they might not be well placed to do it. So I think all round the intentions are right. It's just that the question of timing, the mechanism, how you're going to get around it. So, for instance, another good thing that you perhaps should be doing is to increase research and development, right? Again, it goes back to the same old question. Companies want to enjoy the benefits of research and development, but they might not have the resources to do it, especially the SMEs. How do they get around this difficult question? And I think here we should be looking at what other countries in the region have been doing, what, for instance, Taiwan has been doing, what, for instance, Korea has been doing. And I think these are useful lessons to learn. So increasing the minimum wage by itself is a good thing, but then it has its repercussions. And whether we have taken into account the possible outcomes and whether we have taken into account those negative effects and how they could be mitigated, I'm not so sure. Again, I mean, I think I missed this the first time around. One of the questions that I'm sure has bothered policy makers in Malaysia is the fact that our wages are not rising fast enough.
Yeah.
Right? So you need to raise those wages, as you very rightly pointed out. And this might be a way of doing it, but as we discussed earlier on, it is a good way of doing it, but then it has got some other effects which might not be very good to deal with. But something that I think is staring at our faces is the fact that our industrialization is proceeding at a rather slow pace. And this has been brought out by a number of scholars.
Yeah.
They say that we're going through a phase of deindustrialization. So we want to make sure, yes, reducing the wages, increasing the minimum wage might put us at a higher level of industrialization. But whether we can leap to that level within a short span of time, that's to be seen.
Could that be also because of the region that we are situated in? I mean, the ASEAN region now, you look at countries like Vietnam that are burgeoning, they are really, they're growing economies. You look at Malaysia currently, we number one we are expected to become an aging nation by the year 2030. And then if you look in direct contrast that if you look at countries like Mexico, for instance, you see a large influx of FDIs there because of the fact that they have a younger population, a more active population and all that. And of course, cost is lower there, labor cost is there. So do you think all these factors and even more factors put a burden on the government to not proceed fast enough with the industry because they may lose out FDIs to the neighbors. Look at what happened with NVIDIA, for example. Supposed to be here, then it moves to Vietnam. Tesla's investment hasn't really worked out that amazingly for us. And we have lost investments to Indonesia, Vietnam, and all that. So could this be a burden on us? Why we are moving slow? Because we just want to focus on getting more investments into the country at this point?
Oh, I think the Prime Minister has been marketing the country tremendously
yes, he
well.
has been traveling a lot.
I mean, that's one way of putting it. But he's been trying to promote the country and bring in FDI. I don't know to what extent they have been realized. Lots of MOUs have been signed. Perhaps that's the start of better things to come. But I think generally it takes about 2 years for an application, an approval, or maybe slightly longer for an MOU to translate into actual investment. So you can do another podcast and come out with a report card on how well the Prime Minister has been doing.
Yeah. But, interesting again, I think
a little bit more.
Yeah, sorry, please.
Yes. At a certain level, I think we've already lost out to Vietnam. I mean, there's probably more FDI going into Vietnam than into Malaysia. That shouldn't, I think, discourage us. And what we've been talking about this for a long time, that we don't want to be seen, we don't want to be a nation that focuses on labor-intensive kind of investment. We want to move up the scale, more research-driven, technology-driven, and the rest of it. Actually, that has been spoken about from the time of Mahathir. He talks about knowledge economy, etc. That hasn't really happened. It hasn't happened to the extent that it should have happened. So I wouldn't worry so much about a certain class, certain kind of investment that's going into Indonesia or Vietnam. But I would be concerned about the quality, the kind of investment that is coming in. I would also be concerned about the kind of expertise that we have in order to manage the right kind of investment. And do we have that kind of talent? Do we have those kinds of resources to attract the right kind of investment, the kind that we're looking for?
When you heard Dato Sri Najib, when he was Prime Minister, talking about wanting to make Malaysia a high-income economy, did you think that it was possible?
I think it was possible. I still think it is possible.
Okay.
And it's probably not too far from now. 5 years, 10 years, something like that. I mean, I think it is possible. But I think what is more important is what surrounds it. I'm not very big fan of looking at just one number. I mean, if you just looked at the income and you classified this as a high income nation and you don't have good healthcare and the quality of your education sucks, you might have achieved the number, but I don't know how much of development you're going to achieve after having achieved that one particular number. So I think it's these things. And for instance, you mentioned this thing about aging population. So you achieve high income and then you find that there are vast disparities in income. I mean, that's not a good thing. You achieve that high income, but you find that the aging population is not well supported. Services for the aging population, safety nets are not there for the aging population. That won't do. So I think rather than just focusing on one particular point, you should look at the whole matrix and try to get all these accompanying aspects in place and make sure that they are worthy of a high-income nation.
Again, in this book, you talk about the need for social safety nets, which I do agree to a certain level. But anyway, let's get to that. But of course, we could argue that subsidies are a form of social safety nets, sort of, whereby they ease the burden of the people. Of course, in a big thing about the budget has been the revision of the petrol subsidies that is upcoming next year. Now, how would this impact our economy, do you feel?
Once again, I'm not sure about the timing, but I'm quite sure that you would need to reduce these subsidies, and the best scenario would be not to have subsidies at all. But you're right. I mean, you do need some kind of social safety net, and in the absence of good social safety nets, I suppose pensions are a good substitute. Working for the government is a good...
Very good substitute.
It's a good substitute.
It's the best of all.
But I think that all of this has to be restructured. Now there is a certain population that is supported by the government in some ways or other. Of course, the government is finding it extremely difficult to keep maintaining these expenses. But there's also a very significant portion of the population which doesn't enjoy these subsidies. As you age, cost of healthcare goes up. You up to this point, you still don't have a good health financing system that is available to everyone. Everyone knows how taxed the public healthcare system is. We also know that insurance premiums are likely to go up at some point. Yeah. Insurance companies are finding the burden of paying out, making payments difficult to bear. So obviously, I mean, and this is just one sector that we're looking at, one area which needs attention that we're looking at. With this whole complex of issues, healthcare needs to be restructured. You need to rethink what is happening. And recently, I think the health minister pointed out the number of specialists who are leaving government service, etc., which is also not a very good thing. So we need to restructure the entire healthcare system. And I think that would be part of the kind of safety nets that we need to provide. Urgent thinking is needed along those lines. I mean, not just thinking. They probably have done, I don't know how many assessments on this issue, and there are probably lots of volumes of consultants' reports on this. I think there has to be the political will to implement a restructuring of the healthcare system.
But I mean, yes, definitely the healthcare system needs a restructure, complete overhaul, top to bottom. But I've always thought that perhaps this would not happen because while on an economic level, on a humane level, it's the right thing to do. But the way the healthcare system is based now, it profits big pharma. So which means that and I remember because I think I was exposed to economics when I was in university only, and one thing I learned was the first pillar of economics is that people respond to incentives. The incentive here is not to revisit, because I think you're referring to what the health minister said, whereby that he urged that we should practice more preventive medicine as opposed to more reactive, and that's the right way. But do you think that the profit of healthcare sort of topples any will to revise the system because there's just no incentive?
Yes, I mean, if you're looking at the If it's geared along those lines, and I think we're not going to have a system that is beneficial to the population at large.
Because I think in this book you compare, I think in the first few pages you talk about how Malaysia has followed sort of a commercial route in terms of healthcare as opposed to what is done like in the UK, where you have this very big, what do you call that? What's
NHS?
it called? Yeah, that. And that system seems to be doing very well there. Although some governments have recently called to revise it and all that. We have a good public system, but shouldn't we invest more in growing this public system?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not so sure about your remarks about NHS because I think Rishi Sunak came under tremendous pressure for what people called was a collapsing healthcare system. I think we have, God forbid, if we go the route that the US is taking, that's, I suppose, a commercialized health system such as what the US is offering, which is virtually no health care unless you can afford it. That's a disastrous route to take. We had an excellent healthcare system, yes, and I think we should look at strengthening that healthcare system. Going back to the principles that guided that healthcare system, once again, not just for SMEs, but I think in terms of healthcare systems, we need to look at our neighbors. I think, for instance, Taiwan has an excellent system. Should be looking at that, learning lessons from that.
Okay. Now, again, to just take the topic on social safety nets, you also mentioned in this book that, some safety nets should be put in place. And also it must be ensured that these safety nets aren't taken advantage of. You mentioned this in this book. So what sort of safety nets do you think we should put in place today, in today's economic climate? And how do we prevent those nets from being abused by the people?
I think it'd be a bit difficult to talk in the abstract about how people take advantage of these social safety nets. But one of the things, as we've just been talking about, healthcare, which is an excellent example, is something that could very well be abused. You could afford a government, you just pay a ringgit and you're able to enjoy excellent facilities. And these days, I believe the GHKL pharmacy gives you loads of medicines, which will cost you quite a bit, all for 1 ringgit. So you might find someone who can afford to pay for it, getting away by paying just a ringgit. So how do you ensure that this does not happen? And I think that's where you have to exercise some kind of caution, devise mechanisms that make sure that you have the right trade-off. On one end of the spectrum, you want to make sure that everyone has access to it. But you also want to make sure, if you had a system that's too stringent, too few people will be able to gain access to it. So you want to make sure that the right people gain access to what is absolutely free, and so on and so forth, which means basically on the basis of what they can afford to access. And I think it's how you devise these mechanisms. It's not so much, I think, at the level of theory, at the level of thought, that we have difficulties, but I think it's at the level of execution that we have these difficulties in implementation. Coming back again to what you mentioned earlier, whether you have incentives or don't have incentives, I think it's been an unfortunate development of privatization, plus GLCs getting into the picture, And this has not, in some cases, not been a very helpful combination of events. So when you have GLCs in healthcare, there's an overriding, perhaps, incentive for GLCs to take advantage of their presence in the business and to make profits, which might put the government in a little bit of quandary. I mean, what do you support? Do you want your GLCs to make money from investment in the healthcare system, or do you want to enlarge strengthen the public healthcare system? And I think that's the same kind of problem that that got into the whole transportation problem. Do you want to support national automobile industry, or do you want to enhance your the use of public transport? And as a consequence, you find that you have to pay taxes, all kinds of taxes, which makes you have to support your local cars. And you don't have a very good public transport system.
So in this case, if you're talking that social safety net, must be allocated, of course, we want the right people to get it, definitely. Do you think PADU is the answer then?
Yes, I mean...
Or basically like this, has it done a good enough job to be looked upon, be perceived as the answer?
That's a more difficult question.
Sorry. Let's go back to the first then.
You do need some kind of a system. And you do need some kind of a database.
Yeah.
Whether you needed PADU in the way that it exists, or whether you needed people to register, etc., I'm not sure. Could you have obtained the same information by directly accessing the LHDN accounts or the IC or whatever? I'm not sure. I mean, was there a more efficient way of doing it? I'm not sure. But for sure, you do need a database, and you do need some way, some system of determining whether someone deserves or does not deserve.
Definitely. Now, before we go to the next segment of this, in this book, you do talk a lot about a comparison between SST and GST. That's mentioned in many of the articles featured in this book. So I just want to get your thoughts on this, seeing as to how we have revised diesel subsidies. We are going to revise the next year subsidies for the petrol and all that. Should we go back to GST?
I would think so.
Another broken promise. Okay. There you have it, folks. Prepare yourselves. Because, I mean, it does seem like, I do agree that for me, I look at it as, even though the people may not like it at first, even though the opposition may jump on it, anything that would increase the revenues for the government would trickle down to us, hopefully, in the end. So that's why, for me, when I read your book, I was like, okay, perhaps we should go back to GST. Right? It will make complete sense as opposed to what we have now.
I think I don't know what's really holding the government back from revisiting GST.
I think it's politically motivated to, perhaps, with the upcoming GE16, I think they have to be careful.
I don't have access to people in the corridors of power, so I wouldn't be able to tell you whether it's politically motivated or not. But perhaps the government is trying to get around with some kind of a compromise. And the compromise is you extend the SST. You also try to ensure that you have a good record of the transactions to make sure that there is transactions are in a sense tracked, You know where payments are being made, etc. And I think that's where e-invoicing would help. So I think the compromise is if you have an extended an SST with wider coverage plus e-invoicing, you would get close to what the GST could give you. But then don't ask me, if you are doing certain things to get close to the GST, wouldn't it be easier just to reintroduce
Exactly,
the GST?
yeah.
I don't have the answer to that.
Again, one of the things that I think your book sort of brings back to memory is the time when under PH 1.0, when the finance minister then Lim Guan Eng went on Parliament and made this statement that our national debt is more than 1 trillion ringgit. Right? It's such a big number, 1 trillion ringgit. And I remember the opposition at that time. I think the shadow minister was KJ at that time. He brought up the entire definition of the term, which you highlight in this book as well, where you say that he included contingent liabilities, federal government debt, and lease payments, and which all of that amounted to 1 trillion. When I was a student, I remember when I used to do my economic assignments, it was very hard to get references because the news outside of Malaysia would tell one story and in Malaysia would tell a different story. And this was back when. So what's the right definition of the debt that should be used? Because you do say in this book that this definition is different from international standards. And what's the actual debt that we have right now based on this definition, do you feel?
It's been quite some time since I've looked at the various definitions. To cut a long story short, why don't you just
Google?
Yeah, check what the kind of definition that let's say IMF uses.
Okay, fair enough.
The problem with it really depends on what you want to measure. And how much detail you want to measure. So, for instance, there could be an argument against contingent liabilities, etc., because some forms of debt, the government is standing as a guarantee for those kinds of debt. And if those kinds of debt are not
crystallized, as you say.
Crystallized, yeah. Is that the word?
That's what you use, crystallized, yeah.
Pretty catchy word.
Okay. Yeah, I like your line. You said there's a difference between being and is or something, being and becoming, two different things. Okay. Yeah, I like that line.
Okay. If you're not able to make those payments, then the government would have to step in. So it's sort of, it's more than actual, it's potential. So I think that's where the definitions vary.
Another controversial topic now in recent weeks has been the 5G implementation, 5G contracts and all this. Now, I'm not going to ask you about that. I saw your face just go. Is he going to ask me about that? No, sir. I will spare you. But you do talk about it in this book. But I'm just curious because the line that you say that there is a lack of understanding about this entire project or this term 5G, and that you claim that the 5G could deepen the wedge of inequality between the different sections of society. Why do you say so?
I think it depends on, and this is not just for 5G. I think it's for all of digitization. I think what I had in mind, I think is quite simply that if the West Coast or if the cities have greater access to certain facilities, for instance, 5G rollout, then they would tend to benefit inordinately more than those in other areas. And that would deepen the divide. The way around it, so there are various ways in which you can roll out your 5G. I haven't been following the 5G issue very closely more recently. That's true in part. It's also to stave off any questions you might have on 5G rollout. Yeah, but more seriously, I think it depends on how you want to roll it out. You don't have to exclude rural communities. So you could, one way of rolling out is, of course, to start by rolling it out in the more developed parts of the country. They stand as a showcase, and that helps you establish a stronger reason or rationale for introducing it in rural countries, rural regions. But you could also target it at, let's say, the agriculture sector, which anyway is dwindling. You could try to revive, modernize the agriculture sector through 5G rollout, and that would give you a very different geographical dispersion of how this is being done. Prioritize different areas, and then you'd find that there are other areas, other geographical areas which would benefit, and it would also help with the revival of different sectors. You might also be able to argue that rural areas or the East Coast or the east of the peninsula, healthcare is not very good. They don't have very good access to hospitals. That guided surgery or whatever would work better for them because it takes a long time to transport them to GH in Penang. And so you could prioritize 5G in these rural areas for a different set of criteria, and that would also work well. So I think problem, however, is this: if you have an existing infrastructure, and perhaps the existing infrastructure is much better in the, let's say, the west of Peninsula. So it would be easier to roll it out. You would see the benefits accruing much faster. And from a commercial point of view, that makes splendid sense. You could also look at distributional issues, and you see that there is a greater need for the rollout in the east of the peninsula, and you could start off with that because you want to address these distributional issues. It would take longer to see the benefits. The investment might probably be greater, but you would be serving issues of inequality, regional as well as social income inequalities better if you do that. So it's really what set of criteria you want to use and what your bigger goals are.
Okay. Now I want to get to the next part of this. In this book also you touch on the US-China trade war. And you talk about, I had sort of experience in my work how I can see firsthand how it helps the country in terms of manufacturing opportunities. We get a lot of companies coming in from China saying that they want to perhaps use us as a port hub for their own manufacturing, which they want to remove from China. What ways does this trade war, because you talk about this in the book, you say that it actually has the potential to benefit us. What other ways can it benefit us?
Don't you think it's a very good book? It was written, 5 years ago, and it seems
very current.
Yes.
Did you write it using a crystal ball?
Okay, coming back to your question.
By the way, sir, I want to say this: you're the first guest I've had who've actually said, "I think I've written a very good book."
No, I didn't say that. Actually, I could give you 10 reasons or more why it's not a very good book.
No, it's a fantastic book, sir. Please don't say that.
But I think you have to admit, that there are some issues that I think I
touched on,
have touched on
a lot.
Before it's become
you are
very
the first
popular.
Oracle economist.
Okay, thank you. I won't push for more compliments.
Yeah. So
Okay.
no. So how do you think that this trade war, in your own, would basically help us?
One way in which it could help, as you have pointed out, is if there is a relocation of industries, and now you have, for instance, now this policy of any country but China, ABC, I think they call it. So if there are strong tariffs against China, and if that encourages companies to invest in Malaysia, of course, that would benefit us. The US is, of course, going to look at how much input, how much domestic local input has gone into the production of these goods, etc. So if you had a factory, Chinese factory in Malaysia, and they brought in output which has 90% content that was made in China, and they just assemble it here, or they add another 10% local content, that's not going to help very much. The US, Trump might be dumb, but he's not that dumb. He's going to know where it originated from, and you.
I can see you're a huge fan of Trump.
Oh, I am. So that's not going to work out. So I think that there probably are opportunities, but it's a question of how we position ourselves. We have to also, I think, which is an adjacent issue, but I think also important, how we position ourselves in this issue of the US versus China, etc. And I think all along we've taken a fairly neutral stance, a very pragmatic stance, and I presume that will continue, in which case I think we would be well positioned to attract investment that might otherwise be going to China, or that China might want to reconsider. If they want to reconsider location, we could benefit from it.
Do you think that, because of course in this book you compare how Mahathir 2.0, his relationship with China, then you compare that against Najib. They were both quite similar, interestingly enough, because you can see that Mahathir in his second role as PM was a bit more pragmatic, as the word you use. But when we see Anwar now, he has also had good relationships with China. They've committed a lot of money to us and all that. Considering China and their vision of the world, they have also drawn out their own map and all that. Are they a dangerous ally to be working with?
I don't think they are dangerous.
If you look at what happened to Sri Lanka, how they actually through their loans they now basically run the place. Are they safe to be allies with?
What am I to do? You say you don't have money. You come to me for money. I lend you some money, and you squander it. You're not able to repay my loans. You don't expect me to sit back and smile and say, take your time, repay me whenever you can. Mm-hmm. So I think the burden really is on developing countries that need these loans. China, I think it's this Greek economist, Yanis Varoufakis. He says that they are the most humanist country in the world, or something to that effect. So if you adopted the right approach in handling them, then I think you're safe. If you know what your rights are. You want to protect your sovereignty. You take a loan which you think you can repay. You've done the calculations right, then it's fine. But if you don't do the calculations and you think that here's an easy loan, let me take it, and let's see what happens 10, 20 years later, then I think that there's a problem there. So I think really the onus is on whoever wants to take a loan from China. I don't think the problem is with China.
But in your opinion, how well has Prime Minister Anwar juggled this whole balancing act between our relationships between China and the US?
I think it's too soon to make a judgment on that. It's just been 2 years.
Okay.
And he's warming up to China, and Trump hasn't yet come in. I think he comes in 20th of January. So let's see what happens after 20th of January.
Okay. Now, I wanted to ask you about Trump, but I said, never mind, let's stay on the book. Stay on the book. One part of the book, I think you talk about, you highlight the whole stimulus package that was given after COVID, the 250 billion stimulus package. Despite it being such a big number, you did question its implementation. What do you think went wrong with that entire stimulus package at that time?
I think I did bring it up at that point. And subsequently, I don't think I've been following it too carefully.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember, but I don't know if the...
I think you were talking about how you felt that it didn't reach the right people at that time. Yeah, that the whole way it was set up, the whole mechanism did not allow for that sometimes because it didn't, I think, have proper definitions to people.
I think... yes, I do remember at that point I was concerned about it, but I think the whole, I don't know if my concern was misplaced, but even if it was misplaced, I think it could very easily have been corrected if there were one single document which came out, which sort of reviewed what was done, what packages were issued, and so on and so forth, how it was distributed, mechanisms, etc. And I think generally, not just for COVID, generally, I think we not terribly good at this kind of reporting. And I think that's one of the things that has to be, that going forward, we have to look at. So for instance, you take, for instance, planning, the whole planning mechanism. India was a big fan of planning. It goes back to Nehru and his association with Russia, great friendship for the Chinese, etc. And also some of, and the intellectual climate in India, which was very socialist. So they were big fans of planning. But more recently, they've done away with planning. And rather than having these big, broad plans, I think they are going in more for indicative planning. And also, I think what is important is to tell people we have so much money, we are allocating it on these areas. And then after that, to look at some kind of an accounting system, if you will, which tells you how the allocations that were made, what kind of returns you got, and so on and so forth. So that would give, I mean, on one hand, it helps to have some kind of a planning process, or at least a planning process in terms of these are the government's intentions. This is the government's vision. And this is how we'd like to allocate. And then to have some kind of record, some kind of assessment on how the allocation worked out, and probably also some assessment of did it reach the right target groups, did it achieve the right kind of goals that it was supposed to achieve, and so on and so forth. So I think that again is something that I spoke about in my first book, and that was,
Look
I don't know,
at that.
15 years ago.
So,
So-
you are the oracle that has been bestowed upon us.
So I think we should relook our planning process, and these, I think, are some of the directions in which
Yeah.
we could go.
Now, of course, every prime minister that comes in, and of course, you're right to say that he's just been in power for 2 years, Prime Minister Anwar. So it's hard to actually gauge him or his government. Although there's plenty of points we can talk about, but I will not trouble you with that.
No, I'm not a political scientist. I'm not a politician, so I won't
I'm an
be
economist,
dragged
and
into all
that's
of
it.
this. Yes,
You're not
yes.
getting me, Now, each of the prime ministers that came in, Najib, Mahathir, Muhyiddin, Ismail, and all those people, they inherited a certain economy, an outlook. What sort of economy is Prime Minister Anwar facing now? Especially, let's just talk about in terms of Malaysia and the ASEAN region. What sort of economy is he facing for the coming years that he has to operate in and adapt to?
I think the challenges that he is facing are very much the challenges that Najib was facing, with the additional problem of having to handle whatever was lost through 1MDB.
Yeah.
Okay, so the kind of problems he is facing now is Najib ERIA plus, right? So yes, it is challenging, but very quickly, in essence, I don't think they've changed very much. I mean, one, what are you going to do about your fiscal position? It was a problem for Najib. It is a problem for Anwar. What are you going to do about your operation expenditure? Was a problem for Najib. It's probably some way towards resolving it. You, I think, have cut down number of intakes into the government. A lot of government jobs are on contract, etc. So not fully resolved. I think it's difficult to resolve completely, but something is being done about it. Wages were not rising fast enough. Still is a problem for Anwar. What are you going to do about technology upgrading? Are you going to make your are you going to go for more high quality, technology intensive investments, and how are you going to do it? Was a problem for Najib, is a problem for Anwar. It actually was a problem that Mahathir
It's been
saw
for a long
way
time.
ahead.
Yeah.
Right, and that's how you had your Cyberjaya, etc.
MSc and all that.
MSc and all that. Yeah. So I mean, of course, out of sight, out of mind. So after Mahathir stepped down, people who focused on other things, I think, lost momentum in a sense. So that is a problem. How do you rebuild the SME sector? Remains a very relevant problem now.
You're talking rebuild as a result of COVID.
As a result of COVID, and also, I mean, you look at Korea, they've been built very much by the SMEs. And SMEs contribute a lot to GDP, to development. So if you want to see more development, more GDP growth, SMEs are a source. So what are you doing about SMEs? And of course, this whole inequality issue, ethnic disparities, etc. I think that's been there from, I don't know, 1969 or independence or whatever, and still hasn't been resolved. So broadly, I think the problems haven't vanished. Different levels of success on these problems. Some have been looked at more seriously. Others, the complexity has changed. But along the line, you also have new challenges that are coming up, which probably didn't exist there at the time of Mahathir. So at the time when Mahathir was talking about MSc, etc., there was no Bangalore, and there was the IT sector wasn't a big thing in India.
Now. Yeah.
Okay, India
and China wasn't so active in their modern inventions. Yeah, look at them now.
No,
crazy.
yes. I mean, AI, development of AI. I mean, China is leaps and bounds ahead.
It's insane what they're doing.
They're putting up tough fight to the US. You could completely discount Vietnam back then. You can't. I mean, at least at the lower level, we are, of course, at a different stage of development, but at a lower level, you could discount Vietnam, Indonesia. You can't do that today. So I think it's become a more complex environment, a more competitive environment, and I think you need to come out with the right kind of mindset to deal with that environment.
Now, I wanna close it with this, sir, because in this book you talk also a lot about the MCO, the Movement Control Order, which I think will stay in the minds of all of us for generations to come, and the lockdown. And you, in very diplomatic economist style, you don't really share your opinion on whether it was right, but you do hint that sort of, if you read between the lines, that the lockdown, the MCO, was quite devastating to the economy. There's one thing that you basically reference about how these NGOs actually wrote very scathing letters to the government saying that the MCOs are causing a lot of problem for business and they might even remove their businesses out of Malaysia. So, I mean, looking back now from where you are now, do you think that the MCO the way it was handled in Malaysia, it was done too long? It was very damaging? How badly are we suffering because of the long implementations of MCO, which other countries didn't necessarily do?
You're trying to get me into a
you should have known, sir, when you come on. Landmines everywhere.
To give the then government benefit of doubt, I think it was a difficult time. They were not sure what they were doing. Yeah. They were trying to learn from international practice. I think it was not sure, but I think it was in Sweden where the person who was heading the equivalent of Fauci in Sweden, he didn't think much of the movement control order. And he thought that if you need to go out, you go out. And it's just specific groups that need to be, that the movements need to be controlled. For instance, the elderly, and I think the very young, can't remember, but yeah, the elderly for sure, the sick, the elderly. Otherwise, you just go out and do what you're supposed to be doing. But I think Malaysia had a more conservative attitude. And it might have been a good thing as far as saving lives are concerned, but the economic cost was big.
That's big. So, sir, in just closing, I mean, this book, when I read it, I loved it. I loved your articles.
Thank you very much.
They were very, I mean, of course, I can't compare my understanding with yours. So for my level of understanding, it was very easy to read, and I actually learned a lot. What can people get when they purchase this book?
This particular book, I mean, it deals a lot with COVID. We've forgotten about COVID. Yeah. And if you're looking just at COVID and looking at the numbers, etc., this might not be the best book to be buying.
Yeah. By the way, you're very Malayali in your promotion of your book. Very modest, and actually, he's basically telling you not to buy the book. Basically.
No, I'm not.
No, but please get it. It's a very good book.
I was going to come to the second part.
Okay.
But I think what is still, I mean, as you pointed out, there's still things that are relevant about the book.
Very.
And I think the bigger story or the biggest relevance arises from how you look at ways in which you deal with crises, in ways in which you deal with problems. And I think it's in that sense that you might find value in this book, and how you can apply some of these whatever you learn, lessons or whatever, to some of the problems that you face right now. I mean, you've raised some of them. For instance, healthcare or social safety nets. That was, I mean, that was a very good time to point out the importance of social safety nets. Also, what happens when there's a breakdown of communications? What happens when there's a breakdown in logistics? When you almost enter into a phase of deglobalization, what can you do? So in that sense, I think it's useful. And I think, for instance, when Trump comes in, I mean, it's a matter of time. Yeah. When he comes in, what are the kinds of disruptions that could happen? And what are the kinds of things that policymakers need to think about? How can you be better prepared? I think these are the things that need to be thought about, not just the day before COVID comes in, but on a regular, perpetual basis.
Yeah, definitely, sir. So that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and I hope we could review your other books as well that you have out with Gadjah Budaya. Again, the book is called Regaining Control, Malaysian Economic Policy During COVID and Beyond. You can get this book at Gadjah Budaya. We'll be sharing the links in all of the videos that we're posting on our YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram platform together with Spotify. I read this book and I love it. I think it is if your interest is in geopolitics, politics, economics, and just how we handle the pandemic and our reforms in terms of policy and all that, this book will really be a treat for you. So please go get it. Don't listen to the author. Get the book. It's really nice. Honestly, guys, I wouldn't recommend a book that I don't like, but I really like this book. So please get it if you can. And it's only 128 pages, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a very quick read, and but a fun one nonetheless. So thank you, sir, again for helping me promote this book.
I hope you do a good job of it.
But yeah, so we'll see you all soon, guys. Please, as always, share your comments, share your thoughts. We want to hear what you guys think about the way Malaysia handled the COVID-19 crisis and how we bounce back, and what are the policies that you would like to see implemented. Next, coming up on the show, we have Ms. Hui Ting from Parti Socialist Malaysia discussing about Malaysia's environmental policies and how she hopes more reforms will take place in that arena. So till next time, guys, stay tuned and we'll see you soon. Bye.